Are you a non-Muslim? What can I do for you?
Yeah, it's just a spiritual seeker. So, question I have is, the
No, sorry. Can
hadiths
you tell me
mention.
what does that mean? No, what does that mean by because obviously you just said spiritual seeker. Can you identify
Oh
what
yeah,
that
sure.
means? Because you said you're not a Muslim, but what does that spiritual seeker mean?
Okay, so I'm a believer. I believe in God, and I
Okay,
follow
which God?
practices like meditation and just the only one true God. But I follow practices like meditation
Okay,
and contemplation. I do something called Course in Miracles. That's a spiritual program designed
okay,
to elevate one's consciousness.
okay. So it's you're leaning into Buddhism, as it seems. But when you say to me, like you believe in the one true God or in God, what is the definition of God? What is that God?
The definition for God for me is a higher power that exists beyond space and time and is incredibly powerful and peaceful.
So the basic attributes of God. Okay. All right. So you had a question about Islam. I'll let you ask that first before I start asking you, some questions about your position. I would like let you ask first about Islam. No problem.
So I've noticed that a lot of I'm curious about this. I'm very curious. So I noticed that a lot of these Islamic extremists
Mhm.
they are following the Quran very closely, so they say, and they also following the Hadith very closely. Now I've managed to actually read Quran. I haven't read Hadith. It's too big for me. But to me, it seems that Hadith is the cause of a lot of extremism. Would this be the case?
Now, I'm going to say this with all due respect, but first I'm going to ask you a question. Define what is an Islamic extremist.
Somebody who uses their religion in the name of God to kill and commit atrocities.
Okay. And why is that Islamic extremism and not just extremism since it happens in every faith?
Sure, it's just disproportionately among the under the banner of Islam. I put like this
That's
because I'm just saying
okay.
that it seems to be
Sure.
disproportionate.
Sure. No. What it seems to be, and of course, I'm going to say this with all due respect to you, it seems to be that you are under the influence of incorrect information, brainwashing of the media. That's the only thing I'm going to say to you. Because, for instance, what studies have you actually looked at that states what you said? There's many studies that, for example, will indicate that Muslims in the media, when it comes to crimes or whatever, are covered 5 times more than the average person. So there is a specific agenda when it comes to covering Muslims in the media when crimes happens. For instance, when a crime happens, you would see in the media, it will say Muslim does this. Or they're actually not going to say Muslim. They're also going to say the T word. I don't want to say these words for YouTube just for censorship or whatever. You probably know what I'm talking about. So they will say T does this, this, and that. And if he is a T, then you by default you know this guy is a Muslim. Just like you don't need to think about anything. Okay, but if a Christian does the same exact act, if a Hindu does the exact same act, it will always be Englishman, like Polish man. They'll just mention their nationality. They're not going to mention their religion, and they're certainly not going to use the T word for them. Why do they only use it with Muslims, where there's 2 billion people in the world, like a quarter of the planet, and very soon a third of the planet is Muslims? One from every 3 people, if you understand what that number means. It's a huge, massive number of people. So of course there will be crazy people or evil people, or people who don't follow, or people who do, or mentally ill people, or all of these people will exist, and they will cause these issues and problems. And now, if every time anyone who's born in a Muslim family, has a Muslim name, or have any relationship to Islam, every time they do something, I, as a media, pick that event, use the T word, and highlight his religion, of course, I'm going to think there's a disproportionate amount of Muslims doing things which are wrong. But in reality, that is false and clearly false. Like Naveed Sheikhi has this study, I believe in Nashville University, that looks at human death toll in human history. And number one is atheism. Number two is Christianity. Islam is low on the list. And we are talking about human death toll when it comes to wars, when it comes to massacres, when it comes to that. Muslims had nothing to do with the First and Second World War. Muslims did not drop a bomb in Hiroshima, in Japan. Muslims were not Hitler, which you obviously know, who had like all this Nazi party and some of them having crosses on their belts or whatever. You had George Bush saying praise to Jesus after they dropped the nuclear bomb. Muslims were not the Crusades in Spain. I can go on and on and on. Muslims are not the Zionists today, massacring and murdering innocent babies day and night. The whole world is watching, with the backing of the Western states. So if anyone want to talk about disproportionate and this and that, let's talk about realities. You tell me as big of massacres, these huge massacres that Muslims have done. Give me one name of a huge massacre like this that was conducted by Muslims, like the First and Second World War, or the bombs in Hiroshima, or Mao in China, or Stalin, or all of these atheists and Christians throughout human history. You will not be able to do that, because the fact is Muslims have not done that throughout history. But what you see is very isolated incidents that happens in different communities and countries of people who already have a biased view against Muslims, and they want to push forward something very specific.
My question is, the reason, okay, it's a fair point. There's obviously higher death toll with these atheistic ideals.
Not only that, but I was talking about the media coverage
and the media coverage
highlighting who's the person's religion when they are a Muslim, not highlighting it when they're not, using the T word specifically for them, and using the extremist word only for them as well. That's why I asked you, why did you say Islamic extremism when extremism is something that applies to every ideology, religious or non-religious? Anyone can be extreme.
We agree with that.
People use that because of the brainwashing of it. Okay, go ahead.
But most of these extremists, particularly from Islam, they invoke the power of God to command them to commit these sins.
Okay, that's the second part. Okay, let me respond to that. That's the second part, which I was going to respond to. Your claim that they follow the Quran and Sunnah closely, which, like I said, with all due respect to you, you're not familiar with the Quran to make that judgment that those people who do these things are doing them because they're close to Islam. For example, the very popular group that starts by IS, double IS, whatever, that, it's a very popular, well-known group. You have the West telling you. You have, for example, Trump, you have Hillary, you have many of these people, Obama, telling you we created them, telling you they're supplying them. You have these governments saying we're supplying them with weapons so they can create discord within their own countries so you can easily go in. Now, those people who commit all of these crimes that you'd like to talk about and do extremism or whatever, that in the end, whether you know it or not, many of them are actually supported and funded and being used not only by these Western governments, but they're also being used as a scapegoat to make Muslims look like this horrible people or whatever. I told you there's 2 billion Muslims in the world. You know what's 1%? What's 1% of 2 billion people? Now, I want you to imagine 1%, which is millions of people. I want you to imagine 1%. If Islam, as is what you truly said, pushes you to follow the Quran, to do these extreme acts, meaning the Quran and Sunnah pushes you to that, then you would
I wasn't
at least
saying Quran only, because I've read the Quran.
No, I said Quran and Hadith. Quran and Sunnah. Sunnah is Hadith. So if you're saying Quran and Hadith,
okay.
Yes. Over 90% of Muslims follow the Quran and the Sunnah. So if those 90% of Muslims, let's say 1.8 billion, let's say 2 billion, whichever number you want to pick, just pick 1%. If it was true that these traditions are pushing you to do the actions that you're claiming they're pushing you to do, you're not only going to have 1%, you're going to have more. But I'm saying, let's assume only 1% said, you know what, we're going to follow it. And 89% were reading it, but you were like, you know what, we're reading this, we follow it, but we're not going to do it, which is obviously going to not make any sense, but that's a claim you're making. So if 1% of doing it, now I want you to imagine a world where you have like around 20 million people or more who are extremists. Now imagine this world. You wouldn't be alive today, my friend. You wouldn't be alive today.
But my question is,
it's not going to be an incident where it happens. Yeah.
I know atrocities happen, but they seem to invoke the word of God.
No, again, you seem repeat. No. Again, you seem to repeat the same thing. I'll give you an example. Have you heard of the massacre that took place in New Zealand? You know that massacre, the guy that went with.
Right.
Sorry.
This is the one who went to the mosque, right? And he was,
yes, and he streamed it, and he did what he did with the people with weapons in the mosque, live streaming it to the people. That person had a manifesto. He mentioned Christianity. He had histories of battles between Muslims and Christians. Means what? Does it mean now that Christians are responsible for what this person did? The Crusades, I already mentioned them to you. Mention to me anyone. Buddhists, you look in Burma, they're burning Muslims alive. Hindus, you can look at today. There's already a war happening. You can look at what they're doing today. You can look at what they did in Kashmir. Christians, I already mentioned the Crusades. Jewish people, I can talk to you about extremist groups that bomb hotels and buildings, and it doesn't matter. And they all, you can say, they claim to do it for the name of their faith, their religion. Who did you think the Crusades were doing it for? They were doing it for whatever. That's the claim. Now, do Muslims come to Christians, or do Muslims come to people and claim, oh, you know what, those people are doing it in the name of that, in the name of atheism, in the name of liberalism, in the name of Christianity? No, we don't. Now, you come and say, someone, for example, mentions the name of Islam or whatever, some guy, some sicko or whatever, which, by the way, I believe many of these people are planted and they're there so they can push forward an agenda, like I said multiple times, that makes Muslims look like this person who does all of these evil things and massacres and whatever. Now, I said, you claimed, this is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what name they mention. Your name is, let's take this name, whatever you're using, which is probably not your real name, but let's say your name is Sam. I'm going right now, I'm doing something wrong. And I'm going to say, scream in the name of Sam. Are you responsible now? Are you?
No,
are you actually?
I'm not saying I'm responsible.
No, please.
But if all these people
just
use my name,
just before you respond, before you give me a full response, I'm asking you the question. If I make a cult, like, you know what, I've got like now over 500,000 following, only on YouTube, right? Regardless of other platforms, I'm going to gather all my followings and tell them, all of you go commit crimes. Of course, I'm not going to do that. This is just a hypothetical situation. So nobody like you understand. If these people hypothetically go and all of them commit crimes, and I say, mention in the name of Sam, are you now responsible just because the number increases? The argument is still the same. It's not about how many people do it. It's about, did Sam commission these things? Did Sam command these things? Was Sam a part of these issues or not? That is the only way we can hold Sam accountable for the actions that take place. Now, you mentioned the Quran and Hadith. Whether it is the Quran or Hadith,
I mentioned distinction between the two. I just noticed that after.
So it's not the Quran. So it's not the Quran.
The Quran seemed fine to me. I read it. It seemed fine to me.
Okay, so tell me, what's the problem with the Hadith? Go ahead. Give me an example. Where does the Hadith, because this is the thing. Look, the Quran, I'm going to talk about the Quran first. I'm going to mention a few verses. Because you're trying to claim, because you, by the way, said, now you changed what you said, but you said those people seem to follow closely. No, you tell me, correct me if you said this or not. You said those people seem that they closely follow the Quran and Hadith. You use this terminology. Now you said it's not the Quran, which is fine.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, you are right. I did say that. I said Quran and Hadith.
That's fine. It's okay. It's okay. That's why I mentioned the Quran. So, but those people, if they're Muslims, of course they need to follow the Quran. So you cannot just take the Quran for the picture. So if those people are Muslims and they follow the Quran, which is the same Prophet brought, that Quran mentions, Allah mentions explicitly in the Quran in chapter 5 that if you kill an innocent soul, it's as if you killed all of humanity. And if you save an innocent soul, that it's as if you saved all of humanity. Allah mentions in chapter 17 that if you cannot kill an innocent soul without right. Right?
Actually,
in a court.
Just to reaffirm that verse you mentioned actually was referring to the children of Israel.
No, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. I'll tell you why. Again, this is why you are making judgments when you don't have an Islamic background understanding our texsts. You're asking me.
It's literally in that verse. It says to the children of Israel.
I know what the verse says. I know what the verse says word for word.
Okay,
من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فسق. I can tell you the verse word for word. It's chapter 5 verse 32. I can read it to you, the verse before, the verse after. I memorize it. It's fine. I know what the verse says.
But that's okay.
No, I said من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل. Maybe you don't understand Arabic. I was reading the verse in Arabic.
Say it in English. Say the verse in English. I don't speak Arabic.
No, I'm gonna say the verse. Okay. Like you need to relax and chill. I was reading the verse for you to make a point that you're not understanding our Islamic tradition. So it doesn't make sense for you to come and tell me that the Quran says this. You can ask me, like, what is our worldview on this verse? And I can explain to you. Okay, you read the verse. Doesn't mean you understand the verse. Allah says in the Quran in this verse.
You just confirmed that Israel is in the verse. That's what I was saying. The verse says to the children.
Of course, Israel mentions that the children of Israel are mentioned in the verse. But you are claiming that it's only about them, which is incorrect.
Okay, so what's the verse in English? Because I don't speak Arabic.
Sure. Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions first, by the way, in the Quran chapter 5, He mentions the story of Adam and his two children. And where you have obviously Cain and Abel, when one of them kills the other. And then Allah mentions the grievance of that crime. Why is Allah telling us the story as Muslims? He's telling us that killing is not allowed. So Allah is giving us the story first. And then Allah tells us, because of this event that took place, or because of this grievance of this crime, we have written on the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul is as if he killed all of humanity, and whoever saves a soul it's as if he saves all of humanity. Now, in Islam, Allah tells us in the same Quran to follow the tradition of the previous prophets. Allah, after mentioning the prophets, he says, those are the ones that Allah have guided, so follow their guidance. Allah tells the Prophet ﷺ that we have commanded you to follow the path of Abraham. All of the prophets in Islam were Muslims. We have in Islam sources of legislation. One of them is called Shari'atu man kana qablana, the Sharia or the legislation of those who were before us. If it doesn't contradict our Sharia, we take it into account. So here, I easily answered what you said. The mentioning of the children of Israel is irrelevant because every Islamic scholar says that this verse is applicable to us.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you for that correction. Now,
No, that's fine.
Quran,
so
onto the
no,
hadiths.
I'm not. I'm going. No.
I mentioned
there's other
Quran
people.
and hadith.
No. There's 1 second. There's 5,000 people watching. So I would
Fine.
like to clarify.
No problem.
So I would like to clarify other verses from the Quran. Then we can go into the hadith. Look, I'm not in a rush. We're here chilling. I'm not going anywhere. Right? I'm sitting with you.
All right.
So yeah, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the Quran. I already mentioned this verse. Allah mentioned in chapter 17 of the Quran. You cannot kill the soul that Allah has forbidden without right. Right means judge due processing of someone who killed you first or something like that. Without that, you're not allowed to kill any innocent soul. Explicit in the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, fight those who fight you and do not transgress. In chapter 2, verse 190. Explicit in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal says, those who transgress against you, transgress against them in the same way and do not over transgress. So you have to be just. Allah says in the Quran, if they incline to peace, then you need to incline to peace. Allah tells us in the Quran, Allah does not forbid you. In chapter 60, verse 8. Allah does not forbid you from those who don't fight you because of religion. And do not kick you out of your home from being righteous and just towards them. Allah loves those who are righteous and just. The next verse says, Allah only forbids you from those who fight you because of religion, kick you out of your homes. Now, moving into hadith. Now, I'm going to mention a few narrations, and then you can go ahead and tell me, you know, where is these issues in hadith? Because I know there is no issues in hadith. Prophet ﷺ told us, whenever the Prophet ﷺ, and now I'm going to talk in war, whenever the Prophet ﷺ appointed someone as an army leader in war, and his caliphates after him did the same thing, he commanded them explicitly. The Prophet said, do not kill a woman. In war, now we're talking. We're not talking about in normal life. Okay, we're even talking in a war in the battlefield. The Prophet says, do not kill a woman. Do not kill a child. Do not kill a monk, a priest, an old person, workers in buildings. Do not destroy crops. Do not burn them. Do not mutilate bodies. These are the Islamic commands for war. Is that when you fight against another male combatant. Not that you go and harm any of those people. And we're saying in war, let alone in normal day-to-day life. So now you tell me, where is these problems that you find in hadith that you're saying those people are using to justify what they're doing? Go ahead. By the way, and keep in mind that they have all of these verses and traditions. So what are they going to do now? If they're following the Quran and hadith, how can they ignore it? And I only mentioned a little bit. If you want me to mention more, I can go on and on, give you more verses and more narrations. Now, how can they ignore all of that if they're following truly the Quran and hadith as you claim? So where is it in hadith are they following, as you say, to do these things that you're claiming they're doing it because they're following the hadith or the Quran?
Yeah, no, just so I haven't read hadith myself, so I was wondering because from Wahhabis, for example, they follow closely hadith and Quran. So I'm wondering, and having looked at one or two statements from hadith, some of them just seem ridiculous. If I'm being honest, no disrespect.
Quran or hadith? Which ones? Which one?
No, Quran was fine. I thought Quran was actually really a good book.
Okay,
hadith
hadith,
just seemed, some of it just seemed really ridiculous. So I was wondering, because Wahhabis follow closely the hadith and then obviously plus Quran, I was wondering, so is that what the cause is?
Okay, can you define to me what a Wahhabi is? What is a Wahhabi?
So I was told that Salafi or Wahhabi is somebody who follows closely.
Okay, now there's a different terms. Which one is it?
This is what I mean. I thought Wahhabi and Salafi were the same. If they're not, then please.
Okay, but you told me they're not the same. But you told me that you were told. Who told you?
No, this was me gathering information on different sort of sects within Islam, and Wahhabis take word for word the hadith and Quran, and they use.
Who are the Wahhabis? So who are the Wahhabis?
Wahhabi is a sect that follows hadith word for
word. Can you tell me about them? Who are they? Where did they start? When did they start? What are their principles? Like if it's a sect, it has principles. It has a person they follow, a historical narrative. Do you know any of these things?
Sure. It started off in Saudi Arabia, and it was married within the Saud family to spread their version of Islam uh, a couple of hundred years ago. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, so that's incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. 100% incorrect.
Okay.
Now, you have people using this term and attributing some people. There is no group of people who say we are Wahhabis. And I challenge you now to research and find any websites where people say, "Oh, we are the Wahhabis." Or you're not going to find that. It's a term. It's a slang term. It's a term that is used just like the term you use, the brainwashing term you use, extremist, Muslim extremist. It's the same term, but it's just thrown at certain people. There was a person who was called Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He existed like 200 years ago or something like that. People can choose whether to follow him or not to follow him. He had books that he's written that talks about the Quran or talks about the Hadith and talks about other things. He had certain views. He was a human being that lived in Islamic history. That's as simple as that. That is all the story is about. Now, there are people who follow him. There are people who teach his books. There are people who don't. But none of this has anything to do with the people you're talking about. Now, you said you're understanding that those Wahhabis are people who follow the Quran and Hadith closely. Then I just gave you what the Quran and Hadith says literally word for word. So you're just contradicting yourself. If those people are actually what you say, they are people who follow the Quran and Hadith literally word for word, then they will be the exact opposite of extremism, not the people who do extremism, because they're following the Quran and Hadith word for word. And you read yourself the Quran and you haven't found any issues. And I've given you all of these verses. And I asked you about the Hadith, and you said, I've read something that seemed ridiculous, that term you used. And then you haven't given me an example. What is that thing that you've read about extremism? Where is the example that something that you read? Because now you might tell me something that has irrelevant that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. You are making a claim about extremism.
No, I didn't read a verse in the Hadith about extremism. So my question was, if it's they're following word per word, and after reading Quran, which is very easy to read, didn't really seem to promote extremism. My thought process was, is there something in Hadith, because I already found some things that seem ridiculous in the narration that they could use for their extremism.
Okay,
in the Hadith.
Look, you made the claim when you mentioned these groups that they seem to follow closely the Quran and Hadith. And then I went on to tell you that you don't know enough about these things. And then I ended up giving you verses opposite to what you're claiming. And now when I asked you to present something, because you
I have one verse.
You could have
I have one hadith that will support
hadith,
that.
Yeah. So the verses are the Quran, the Hadith are not verses. They're just tradition. Okay. So we call it hadith. So give me an example. Yes. What is that hadith that you have that will allow people to do extremism?
Okay. This is a second question for another time. But hadith and Quran are not the same level. Is that what you're saying?
No. For Muslims, the Quran is the word of God verbatim.
Okay.
Verbatim God speaking. The hadith is not verbatim the word of God. The Quran is, of course, more holy because the Quran is the verbatim word of God. Okay. It's the speech of Allah. It's the speech of God. Now, the hadith is also revelation, but it's revelation to the Prophet, and the Prophet expresses in his words or events that take place where the Prophet agrees upon or disagrees on or things like that. So it's not the same as the Quran, of course. But again, with the hadith, I 100% am with the hadith the same way I'm 100% with the Quran. Now, I'm asking, where is that hadith that anyone can bring up and say, okay, here you go. This is the hadith, or here's the Quran that shows that this is why people do what they do.
So in the hadith, I saw a narration, and this is coming from memory, so it's not going to be accurate. It said something about an old man who would not prostrate. And then it later said that we later killed him, or he was killed.
Sorry, can you say that again? He's not prostrating? Huh?
So it was about he was not praying, and he dropped a rock or something or sand.
Who?
An old man. And he was later killed.
Old man was not praying. Old man was not praying. He had a rock in his hand. He dropped, and then people killed him.
He said, "This is enough for me." And then the narration, I'm just reading the narration. The narration said, later he was killed.
No, you're not reading the narration because you haven't given me any narration. So, do you know how hadith works?
Apparently, it's about something that the Muhammad might have said or done. Hundreds of years later.
Hadith is composed of hadith is okay. I'm gonna explain to you. Hadith is composed of two things. It's composed of the text of the hadith, the incident that happened, the event, the speech that is told, etc. And then it's composed of something else which we call a sanad, which is a chain of narration of the people, individuals that transmitted this information to us. Now, that chain of narration can be weak, meaning, for example, one of the person who narrates for another person could not have met him. He was born 200 years before him, for example. So he couldn't have met him or heard the information. So then we would know this chain of narration is wrong. A person in the chain of narration is a liar, is a fabricator, has an issue with his character. We would reject this narration. Now, we have, for every hadith, we have a chain of narration, and we have the text itself. And for every hadith, we will have it in numbers, because every book of hadith will have chapters and numbers of a hadith. Now, whether it is, we have different books. We have Bukhari and Muslim, which are the overwhelming majority of correct narrations, meaning they're all authentic narrations. Then we have other books which can contain valid narrations and narrations which are weak. For example, we have a Nasa'i, we have a Tirmidhi, we have a Ibn Majah, we have all of these other books that have narrations. Now, you claim that there is a narration. Now, can you please provide the source, meaning which book is this narration mentioned in, and the number of the hadith that you're quoting? Go ahead.
I'd have to get it from my bookshelf, but it's from the Bukhari hadith, and just looking into it, it was.
You're claiming this is in Bukhari?
No,
I
this
think
it
was in the beginning of Bukhari, yeah? Is the beginning of Bukhari?
It is in Bukhari. I'm not claiming it.
Okay.
And it said.
Okay.
Yeah, it said that.
Okay.
With so if I was an extremist, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this.
No. I'm going to say that you are an extremist now, but with all due respect, you are an extremist and lying. That's why you. With all due respect to you.
No,
and I'll tell you why I'm saying that. You are. But you have no clue anything about Bukhari. Bukhari, the first chapter of Bukhari. Do you know what it's called?
I didn't say first chapter. It's in the first few chapters.
Okay, what is the second chapter of Bukhari called?
I've got it on my bookshelf. I can't tell you. I can bring it and show you.
Go ahead, show me the hadith in Bukhari now.
If you give me one moment, I will go get it. Of
course, go ahead. Okay. Show me. But again, you said, listen, you said a man had a piece of rock, an old man had a piece of rock, he dropped it, he said, this is enough for me, and he was killed later. So please find that narration. Go ahead.
Sure, give me one moment.
In Sahih al-Bukhari.
So yeah, I got it here. So this is it
before you do. Before you do, here the chapters of Sahih al-Bukhari are the first chapter is about wahy, kitab al-wahy, revelation. Second chapter is about iman, faith. The third is about wudu, ablution that you do before the prayer. Ghusl is also about washing the body. Then haid, which is menstruation. Then kitab al-tayammum, which is something that you do also in case you don't have water for you to pray. And then the book of Mawaqit al-Salah, and then the one of Adhan, the call of prayer. These are the first few books of Bukhari. So would you claim it was in the beginning of the book? Now, I would like you to show me now, where is it in Sahih Bukhari? Please give me the number and the chain of narration for this narration that you just quoted. Go ahead.
Sure. Give me a moment. It's a very big book, so just give me a second.
Shouldn't be hard to find. Probably in the beginning somewhere, as you said.
Yeah, that's my logic, yeah. Okay, so this was in 18 prostration during recital of Quran.
18. What are you? Sorry, I don't know understanding what you're saying.
Sorry, I don't know the structure. It's 457.
457.
Okay, you got that?
So what? Hadith number 457?
That's right. Yeah. So I was saying I could use this verse. Now that I am
no. Go ahead and read it. No. Go ahead. No.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead and read the narration, but not only narration, read the chain of narration. So not only the hadith itself, but the chain of narration as well.
I don't know what that means. Chain of narration.
That means if you're holding Sahih Bukhari in your hand, it's not just going to tell you the Prophet said. It's going to say it's been reported to us by this person. He told us that this person, he told us that this person, he told us that this person, and then he'll mention narration.
I got you.
Okay, so please do that.
Narrated Abdullah bin Mas'ud. The Prophet recited Surah Najm 103.
Okay, so there is no chain of narration.
But it's here in the book, so
it only says. It only says. No, I'm telling you, it only says narrated Abdullah bin Mas'ud is what you're telling me.
Okay. Can I read the rest of the verse?
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Sure. And so recited Surah.
No. Okay, now I know what this narration is about.
Can I say it for the viewers?
But
So that they
read it,
also
yes.
yeah.
Read it, yes. Read it,
Right.
read it.
So the Prophet recited Surah Najm at 103 at Mecca
But
and
this is going to be
persuaded
really funny, but go ahead.
while
Yes.
reciting it. And those who were with him did the same, except an old man who took a handful of small stones or earth and lifted it to his forehead and said, "This is sufficient for me." Later on, I saw him killed as an unbeliever.
Sure. Saw him killed as an unbeliever. Does it say we went and killed him as an unbeliever?
No, but why would he
No.
see him
Your
killed?
argument was sorry. Your argument was you're going to
Sure.
use this narration for extremism. Does
Sure.
this narration command or anywhere says that you should go kill, number one, or that the people who are saying the narration themselves went and killed anyone?
So if that's
Let's
the
start with
case,
that.
why
Before I
does it
even
say
explain to you,
non-believer?
no. I'm going to explain to you the narration. But first, respond to the question and be sincere.
Sure.
Does the narration, because you're claiming it's going to be used, it has to have one of two things. Either it commands you to go and murder an unbeliever, or it mentions that the people did it. So then you'll say, oh, it's a justification. They did it, so I'm going to do it. Now, does the narration do either of these two things? Let's start with answering this question first.
So that was your question again, sorry?
My question was, does the narration say, command you to go and do it, go murder anyone or whatever? Or does it even say that the people, they went and they killed the person? Does it say any of these two things?
It doesn't say explicitly that, but it implies because he's non-believer.
No, not explicitly or implicitly. No. That's what you're claiming. Okay, show me which part of the narration says, because he was a disbeliever, he was killed. Go ahead.
It doesn't say because he was a disbeliever, but they saw him killed as a non-believer.
That's what you said the narration implies. So show me, where does the narration imply or say or hint that because he was a disbeliever, he was killed?
So if he was just killed for another reason, it should have just said he was killed, right? Why would they have to say
he was
he's an
killed for
unbeliever?
another reason? But no, it's not should or shouldn't. It's not, the hadith is not based on what you prefer or not prefer. But you, with all the respect, have extremism in, as I said, lying, which means misrepresenting what the narration says, because the narration doesn't say, and you claim it says something it doesn't say, because you don't know what the narration is about. Look,
the narration said he was killed.
No.
As a non-believer.
Sure.
It didn't say he was killed. It just said as a non-believer. This is what I'm
sure.
Why
he then
I'm
was
not saying
seen,
I'm
the person who
extreme.
narrates. No. All the narration says is the person who narrates later saw that person was killed as an unbeliever. When it says killed as an unbeliever, meaning he didn't accept Islam and became a believer. No, he remained as an unbeliever and was killed. And when he died, he was an unbeliever. That's all the reporter is telling you. He's not telling you we killed him. He's not telling you to go and kill anyone. It's you misrepresenting what the text says. And this is the problem. This is when people...
No.
Allow me to finish.
Okay,
Allow me to finish. The problem, this is the problem when we have people, with all due respect to you, who are educated and they go to Islamic sources, they read an Islamic source, they don't understand how to navigate these texts. In Bukhari, what he does, for example, he will mention multiple narrations about one incident. So if you go to the narration before, the narration after, you'll see here it's talking about prostration, or the verses of Surah An-Najm specifically, or this incidents to do with the prostration in Surah An-Najm, or the chapter is going to be talking about prostration. So that Bukhari collects separate narrations about one specific topic. Now, what scholars do is that they know the background. They know the context of the event. And then they tell you the event is 1, 2, 3. This narration is talking about this specific thing. This is talking about, and this is how it's understood. But when someone takes something, completely disregards of its Islamic context, of course, you're not going to be able to understand anything, because obviously you're taking thing completely out of the historical context.
Isn't that what extremists do?
Please. No, it's not, because even an extremist is not going to be able to use this verse, because this hadith does not command you to murder anyone, and this hadith does not tell you you can do it or you're justified or has anything to do with that. It's just your clear misrepresentation of the narration. And that extremist is, if, as you claim, if he follows the Quran and hadith closely, then he would read the other narrations about the topic. He would read the narrations about not killing anyone unjustly. You'd read the entire verses that I mentioned to you that says about not doing that. Now, what is this talking about? Now, let me answer this hilariously ridiculous point with all the respect that you brought. This here is referring to a verse, a specific verse in chapter Najm, Surah Al-Najm of the Quran, where a specific verse was revealed that Allah Azza wa Jal was warning the disbelievers, and then Allah Azza wa Jal commands people to prostrate, i.e. prostrate to your Lord. Okay, So in the Quran, there's something called a place of prostration. There are certain verses where a Muslim would prostrate to God after reading this verse, where God commands you to prostrate, or God mentions the prostration. Now, there is a verse in Surah An-Najm which mentions prostration. Now, the historical background is when the Prophet ﷺ, he recited this verse to the believers, and the disbelievers were there. And due to the fact that the Quran had so much miraculous nature and eloquence of speech, and they were Arabs, and their understanding that this is the speech of God, not a human being, because they knew the Arabic language, they all fell into prostration reading those verses. This narration here mentions one person excluded from the prostration from the disbelievers who were listening to the verses of the Quran being recited. That person, the narrator says, I saw him, he did not prostrate, but he took a piece of the dirt and he pointed on his head and he said, that's sufficient for me. Rather than prostration, he did that. Rather than going on the floor with his head, he took a piece of dust or whatever and he put it on his head and he said, that's sufficient for me. So that was his prostration, essentially. So you see, the context is very simple. Now, when he says, I saw him later on, killed as a disbeliever, because there was multiple battles between the Muslims and non-Muslims. When the Prophet ﷺ left, so the narrator says he saw him in battle. When there was a battle between Muslims and non-Muslims, he saw that person that was so arrogant that he didn't prostrate. He saw him dying as a disbeliever in battle. Okay?
That makes sense.
So there was battles. The Prophet ﷺ, for example, when he left Mecca, because he was being persecuted for 13 years, his companions were killed. Muslims were very weak, so the Prophet had to leave and go to Medina, in which he was welcomed. The minute he left, the disbelievers went to fight him. The Battle of Badr was there, which there was 1,000 disbelievers and 300 believers. They barely had any weapons, but they still won the battle, and they fought the disbelievers. And many of the heads of Quraysh, the tribe in Arabia, the disbelievers were killed in battle. That they started, that they attacked the Muslims. Then Uhud was after it, which also they attacked the Muslims. Then Khandaq happened, which also they attacked the Muslims. So this companion is talking about a person who did not prostrate when a verse of the Quran was revealed because he was arrogant, and he's telling us the outcome that he saw that person, because of his arrogance, God punished him, that he died in the battlefield as a disbeliever. Now, no extremist will ever be able to use this verse, because at least if those extremists are like you said, they read the Quran and Hadith, they would at least know the context and what they're going to do. They're not going to pick this verse, which does not command you to kill anyone, which doesn't say that they killed anyone. They are not going to be able to use any of that and ignore everything else in text, which is explicitly clear, which I told you. But someone like you, with all due respect, who is not presenting the text the way it is, and pretending as if that's what they're doing.
Would do, right? I'm not saying I'm extremist.
No. That's what you would do, because there isn't a single extremist. And I challenge you now to show you how, as I said, you are the one who is extremist online. Bring me one extremist. Go Google it now. One extremist that uses this as a justification. This specific narration. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think they have it on Google.
You know what? As a gift, I will even send you 500 pounds. Go ahead. Find me one person. What one person? I'm not going to ask you to find me 100, 10, 20. Find me one person who says, look, you know what? I was reading this verse, which is specifically about the revelation of Surah Najm and about this believer killed in battle, and I used it to become an extremist, ignoring everything else in the Quran and Hadith, which explicitly command me not to do so. Find me that person, please.
So I don't think they do it on Google, and I don't think they post exactly their plans. But
well, you found this on Google, so probably that's how you bought the book. Yes.
No. But yeah, that was my only point. I do have other questions about hadith.
No. That was okay. No. With all due respect, that was your insincerity.
Sure.
Why? Because if you were sincere, you wouldn't claim. Look. No, it is. I'll tell you why it's insincerity. No. You asked a question, but you didn't ask a question now. You are claiming that they would use this. Well, nobody uses it.
I'm saying
because it doesn't imply either explicitly or implicitly anything to do with murdering anyone. So if you were honestly sincere, you wouldn't stick on this position and keep saying, "Oh, he will keep using this."
If you were just say, "I don't know," what would you use?
There's nothing I could use.
I'm just asking a question. That's all.
There is nothing I could use, and that's the argument I'm making. Because if whichever type of extremist you are in reality will have to be presented with all of the verses and the hadith in the Quran and the Sunnah that clearly shows you that you're not able to hurt anyone innocent, that you have to treat people justly, that you have to treat people correctly, and you cannot ignore any of that.
Sure. I do have some other questions with hadith, but I understand if you want to move on. I think you want to hit the other questioners.
Okay,
So
let's take the last question before we move on.
okay. So yeah, I did read some hadith where they mentioned that if you drink camel urine, you will be healed, or if you put a fly in, if you find a fly in your water.
No,
and
okay,
you
look,
dip-
I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna.
These are ridiculous.
These
You
are
also agree.
no. I don't agree. The only thing I agree with is, with all due respect, the only thing that is ridiculous is your level of comprehension. And I'm saying this with all due respect, because you are basing a judgment over something you don't understand. I'll tell you what I'll tell you to do. Go now, do a basic Google research. Go now, do a basic Google research.
Are you gonna respond to those
not
hadiths
only,
or not? Are you gonna respond to those?
that's what I'm doing right
not?
now. That's
Okay.
what I'm doing right now. Go now, go do a little very basic research on how in medicine you don't only use the excrements of animals, not only camels, but animals in general, but even insects, to create antibiotics and medicine. Now you go do that, and once you learn and understand that that can be used for a specific disease, that hadith narration refers to a specific stomach disorder that they have. And even you will find that camel urine is used in medication for that specific disease that I mentioned. So now you will understand the only thing ridiculous is, as I said, with all due respect, the level of comprehension that you have towards these tradition. Before you base a judgment, you could ask a question and understand. Now, the same thing would be with any other narration that you'd bring. But I would rather talk about foundational things, because now what you're doing right now is you're clutching to straws, things which you don't understand, with all due respect, and they're not the foundation of the religion. Like a narration about a group of people who the Prophet prescribed them to do a specific thing, which was medicine for them. How does that got anything to do with the foundations of Islam or the religion or extremism or any of the things that you brought forward?
It's in the hadith.
In reality,
that's why I mentioned it.
all it did is it did a register in your mind. Your level of comprehension did not fully understand it, and the result is that you made a judgment over, like, this only book that you have in your hand have over 6,000 hadith. You made a conclusion over everything else. And that's why I said, a person who's not a person of knowledge cannot pick Bukhari and Muslim and these books and read them, because you collect these narrations, and through collecting these narrations, you understand the wider context, like I showed you with Surah An-Najm, and you understand in reality why is this being said. But a person who doesn't want to learn, doesn't ask a question, he makes a judgment. He says this is ridiculous, and extremists will use this narration about the camels.
That's why I'm here, right?
And murder people. Anyways, no, but look, there is a person who asks a question, and there is a person who speaks as if he knows what he's saying.
I don't know what I'm saying. That's why I'm here.
No, you said, oh, they will use this verse. They use these verses. They would do if they were extremists.
I said they could.
If they were extremists. And no, you said they use these verses if they're extremists. That's what the extremists would use.
I said they could.
That's what the extremists use.
would use. I didn't say they. I don't know what an
Again,
extremist is.
and that's what I'm saying. Saying. They don't use it. You're just creating something out of
I don't know if they do or do not. I don't know any.
Anyways, okay. I'll let the people be the final judge over whether you actually were coming to learn, or you held positions and you believe that you know what you're talking about. And then when you were called out on the things that you mentioned, you realized that they are not what you were saying they are. Anyways, Sam, I have to move on to
Thank you very much.
person.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Bye-bye. See you.